If you're chasing success, stop for a moment. Listen to one mistake I made. People say I lived a successful life, but what they don't know is that I paid for that success with everything in my life that truly mattered. My name is Harold Malik. I am 80 years old, and this is the story of the life I built with relentless effort, and the parts of myself I slowly lost along the way. I was born in a small, forgotten neighborhood where ambition was treated like a dangerous idea. People there did not dream out loud. They survived quietly. Hope was rationed, and expectations were kept deliberately low. My father worked as a low-level clerk, a man who left home every morning with tired eyes and returned every evening carrying silent disappointment. He was not a man of many words, but his exhaustion spoke louder than any complaint. My mother held our home together with patience and sacrifice. She stretched meals, stretched hope, and stretched herself far beyond what anyone should have to endure. As a child, I learned something very early. Poverty does not only empty your pockets, it empties your confidence. It teaches you to shrink before the world has a chance to challenge you. I watched my parents count coins at the kitchen table, whisper about bills, and measure every decision against what we could not afford. I wore the same shoes year after year. I heard the same quiet prayer repeated endlessly. May this be enough. I hated that life. I hated the helplessness of it, the feeling that life was happening to us instead of for us. That resentment planted something sharp and unbreakable inside me. I never spoke it out loud. I never shared it with anyone. I carved it deep within myself. I will never live like this again. While other children played outside, I worked. I delivered newspapers, cleaned shops, ran errands, and accepted any task that offered even a few coins. I studied late into the night, not because I loved learning, but because education felt like the only escape route available to me. Every exam I passed felt like one step farther away from the life I despised. Over time, ambition stopped being a desire and became my belief system. In my early 20s, I started my first business. It was nothing impressive, a small operation barely surviving. But it was mine. I slept on office floors, skipped meals, and treated exhaustion as a necessary sacrifice. When people told me to slow down, I smiled politely and worked harder. Fear was my fuel. I feared going back to nothing. I feared being invisible. I feared becoming ordinary. Slowly, success began to take shape. One client became two. A small office became a larger one. My name started to carry weight. People began listening when I spoke. For the first time in my life, I felt powerful. I believed I was building a future. I did not realize I was also building a cage. At that stage, I could only see one thing ahead of me: progress. And I was willing to give everything to keep moving forward. By the time I entered my 60s, I possessed everything I once begged life to give me. A large house with silent hallways, expensive cars parked like trophies, a name that opened doors before I even knocked. When I entered rooms, people stood. Younger men listened carefully, waiting for guidance, repeating my story as proof that discipline and sacrifice always pay off. From the outside, it looked like victory. But success carries a side effect no one warns you about. It isolates you. It places distance between you and everyone else, then convinces you that distance is strength. My days disappeared into meetings, contracts, numbers, and decisions that never truly ended. My nights were quiet, even when my family slept under the same roof. My wife learned to speak to me in summaries, reducing her thoughts into efficient sentences, as if my attention were a limited resource. My children learned not to expect my presence. They stopped asking when I would be home. Disappointment had trained them to be self-sufficient. I told myself I was doing all of this for them. That lie carried me farther than truth ever could. Late at night, when the house finally rested and my achievements had nothing left to say, A heavy emptiness settled in my chest. I tried to drown it the only way I knew how. More work, bigger goals, wider expansion. I believed progress could silence discomfort. I kept promising myself one more deal, one more milestone, then I will slow down. I never did. The strange thing about constant achievement is that it eventually loses its taste. The more I gained, the less I felt. Praise turned into background noise. Money stopped exciting me. Victories felt mechanical, like checking boxes on a list that no longer mattered. I watched my children grow into adults from a distance. I attended birthdays, graduations, and celebrations physically, but not emotionally. I smiled for photographs. I shook hands. I said the correct words. Inside I was absent. And the strangest part was this. No one questioned it. Society applauds obsession when it produces results. People forgive absence when it arrives wrapped in success. No one asks if you are okay when you look like you are winning. No one asks what you have sacrificed when the scoreboard favors you. So I kept running. I became known as a strong man, a disciplined man, a man who never slowed down, someone reliable, someone unbreakable. But strength without reflection is just denial in disguise. Deep inside, something essential was missing. Not money, not status, not even purpose, at least not the kind written into business plans. What was missing was connection. Connection to my wife beyond logistics. Connection to my children beyond obligation. Connection to myself beyond achievement. I did not know how to say this out loud. Admitting it felt like weakness. So I did what I had always done best. I ignored it. And that is when my body decided to speak for me. The loneliness grew quietly, patiently, like a shadow stretching longer each year. I told myself this was the cost of greatness, the invisible tax paid by those who rise higher than others. I convinced myself that feeling empty was normal, even necessary. Yet every success felt colder than the last. I began waking up tired despite sleeping, restless despite winning. Still, I refused to stop. Stopping felt dangerous. Slowing down felt like surrender. I believed motion itself was proof of worth. I did not realize that running without direction only takes you farther from what matters most. I mistook momentum for meaning, applause for love, and achievement for identity, unaware that everything essential was quietly slipping away from me while I kept chasing forward. The heart attack arrived on an ordinary morning, disguised as nothing important. I was preparing for a critical meeting, reviewing numbers, scanning projections, planning my next strategic move. My schedule was tight, my mind already ahead of the present moment. Then a slight pain appeared in my chest. It was dull, almost polite. I ignored it without hesitation. I had deadlines. I had responsibilities. Pain had never stopped me before, and I was not about to let it interrupt my momentum now. Minutes passed. The pain returned, sharper this time, heavier, more demanding. Breathing became difficult, as if the air itself had grown thicker. My vision blurred at the edges. Still, I tried to stand, to move forward, to maintain control. Then my body made the decision for me. My legs gave out. The world tilted, and I collapsed. I woke beneath harsh hospital lights, surrounded by machines that beeped and hummed with mechanical certainty. Tubes and wires connected me to devices performing the work my heart had failed to do. The smell of antiseptic filled the air. A doctor leaned close, his voice cutting through the noise with practiced calm. "You're lucky to be alive." Lucky. For the first time in decades, I was forced to stop. Not by discipline, not by planning, by reality itself. My body lay fragile, exposed, stripped of authority and control. In that stillness, a terrifying thought entered my mind. What if this was the end? No board meetings waiting for me. No unfinished deals. No quarterly reports. No legacy presentations summarizing my achievements. Just an ending, quiet and final. Suddenly, everything I had chased felt painfully small. My wife sat beside my bed, holding my hand with a grip that trembled. Fear filled her eyes in a way I had never seen before. My children stood nearby, unsure of how to speak to a man they barely knew beyond his reputation and title. They looked at me like strangers searching for familiarity. And in that moment, a realization struck me harder than the heart attack itself. If I had died that morning, my success would not have comforted them. Money would not have filled the silence. Status would not have eased their fear. Titles would not have replaced presence. My awards would not have held my wife's hand at night. My achievements would not have taught my children how to grieve. I had built an empire and neglected the people standing inside it. That truth shattered something within me. For the first time, I saw my life clearly, without excuses or justification. I saw how often I chose progress over presence, ambition over attention, motion over meaning. I saw birthdays missed, conversations rushed, emotions postponed for a future that never arrived. Lying there, powerless, I understood how fragile everything truly was. The strength I had worshipped vanished in seconds. The control I believed I possessed dissolved instantly. All that remained were the relationships I had neglected and the time I could never reclaim. Recovery gave me something I had never allowed myself before. Time. Time to reflect. Time to listen. Time to sit with uncomfortable truths I had spent decades avoiding. In the quiet of that hospital room, stripped of momentum and expectation, I realized that survival alone was not enough. Living required something I had forgotten long ago. Presence. And for the first time in my life, I wondered not how much I had achieved, but what I had become. I did not yet know how to change. I only knew that returning to the same life was no longer an option. The heart attack had stopped my body, but it had also awakened something deeper, something honest, something afraid, something ready to finally listen. Recovery did not arrive dramatically. It came slowly, quietly, without applause. Days blended into nights, and nights into mornings marked by medication schedules and measured walks down hospital corridors. My body healed faster than my mind. Forced stillness exposed thoughts I had buried beneath decades of motion. Without meetings to attend or decisions to make, I was left alone with myself for the first time in my adult life. At first, the silence terrified me. I had spent years believing that movement meant value, that busyness proved importance. Now, stripped of urgency, I felt small, useless, replaceable. The world did not pause because I had. Business continued. Markets shifted. Someone else sat in my chair. For a man who built his identity on being needed, this realization was unsettling. Yet within that discomfort, something unexpected happened. I began to notice. I noticed how sunlight entered the room in the early morning. I noticed how my wife's voice softened when she spoke without rushing. I noticed how my children stayed longer each visit, slowly opening up, testing whether I was finally listening. For the first time, conversations were not interruptions. They were the point. I started asking questions I had avoided my entire life. Who was I without my achievements? Who was I when no one was watching? What would remain if everything I built disappeared tomorrow? The answers were not flattering. I saw how often I had confused providing with loving, how I had used responsibility as an excuse for emotional absence, how I had mistaken control for strength and distance for discipline. None of it made me evil, but none of it made me fulfilled either. I understood then that success is a terrible teacher when it goes unquestioned. It rewards behavior without examining cost. It applauds outcomes while ignoring damage. And if you let it, it will slowly convince you that results matter more than people. I did not want to live that way anymore. Change did not come as a dramatic declaration. It came through small, deliberate decisions. I began leaving earlier from meetings. I started saying no without guilt. I learned how to sit with discomfort instead of escaping it. I listened without checking the time. I spoke without planning an exit. I apologized Not once, many times. To my wife, to my children, to myself. Some wounds healed quickly, others did not. Trust, I learned, grows slower than success ever did. But I stayed, consistently, quietly, without expecting applause. Presence became my new discipline. As my health returned, so did temptation. The old world waited patiently, offering relevance, speed, and validation. I felt its pull, but something inside me had shifted. I no longer measured my days by productivity alone. I measured them by connection. I discovered a truth that no achievement had ever taught me. Life is not remembered in milestones. It is remembered in moments. Moments when someone felt seen. Moments when you showed up. Moments when you chose people over progress. Now, at 80 years old, my days are simpler. I wake without urgency. I walk without chasing. I speak with intention. I am no longer the strongest man in the room. I am no longer the most admired. But I am present. And presence, I have learned, is the rarest form of wealth. When my time finally ends, I know what will matter. Not the deals I closed. Not the titles I held. Not the numbers attached to my name. What will remain are the hands I held. The words I meant. The moments I did not rush past. I once spent my life building an empire. Now I spend it building meaning. And that, at last, feels like success. If you liked this video, please like it and subscribe to the channel.